I'm going to very briefly go over the first assignment for Ling 100. If you can read the paper on your own and don't want a verbal explanation, you don't have to watch this, but I figured I'd just talk about it verbally in case you want a nice verbal explanation. So, as a reminder, you can work in groups of up to 3 people. You can totally do this individually. It's designed to be done individually, but if you want to put 3 or 2 minds together and take the best of all your answers, feel free to do that. If you're looking for group members, feel free to post in the discussion board to find people, or you can talk in your Facebook group chats or the Discord group chat. I'm sure people will post it on the discussion board too if you're looking for it. Um, Submit these on a different piece of paper or PDF or typed document, however you want to submit it. Just one per group. We'll post feedback to, or the feedback will be posted to everyone who submits it on Canvas. You'll all get the same feedback and grade, but just one submission per group. Um, and yeah, point form is fine unless the question specifically asks for full sentences. So let's just talk about each of these questions. It's 20 points in total. It's 10% of your grade. 2 points is 1%. We'll keep it really simple like that. So it's one big question per lecture. And this is something that we do where we take the entire lecture and we try to, apply it to the real world or apply it to something. So that way we take everything we learned and do something with it. So the first question, we're going to take a look at something in the real world where there have been claims that an animal speaks language. So 2 years ago, there was this dog that got a report where the dog presses buttons and it speaks to humans. Now, in the news articles and the original videos, there was not actually a claim that the dog speaks language. They were pretty careful with their words, but on Facebook and Twitter, it was misconstrued very quickly. Uh, so I have a link to a YouTube video on the PDF itself. You can click on that little blue bar there to access it, but you can also download it on Canvas. So if we take a look, it links to this video right here. A speech pathologist taught her dog Stella to speak. You'll have to watch the video or download it. You can also read the articles, but I think the video is really the best way to see how this works, to get the best understanding. But I also take some excerpts from the article here and link the articles so you can check those out too. But it's not as clear how this works. So you'll watch the video, you'll read the article, and then your job is to take a look at the 12 design features that we learned about. And for each of those design features, to ask whether or not this dog Stella displays that design feature with her buttons. For semanticity, arbitrariness, creativity, displacement, and so on, you're going to say either yes, that design feature is demonstrated, somewhat, or no evidence. And then you'll explain why you've said that. So if you say yes, for example, you will specify why you said yes in 1 or 2 sentences. And these can be point form. You're basically saying, like, yes, displacement has been shown because in this case, when she pressed this button, she wanted to do this thing and it was talking about something in the past. And you'd give the example in the video or article. If you say somewhat, you would say, well, I think this happened because in this case, this thing, but there's not enough evidence because we didn't see this or that. Try to use somewhat sparingly, but somewhat is a good thing if you don't want to fully commit. And I try to give an explanation. If you don't want to fully commit to a yes, just try to explain why you haven't committed to a yes. Be as concise as you can. And if you write no evidence, explain why you've said no evidence. But more importantly, and you'll have to say no evidence for some of these for sure. And this is really the interesting part. This is where I want you to really think. You'll have to talk about what you would need to see this dog do using buttons. So, this dog's communication system, what would this dog have to do in order for it to have that property of human language? So, for example, let's say this dog does not demonstrate prevarication, for instance. Using buttons, what would this dog have to be able to do? What would this dog show in order for you to be convinced that it does have this property? Or let's say you say there's no evidence this dog has cultural transmission. using buttons and this dog, what would this dog have to do for you to be convinced that this dog does have cultural transmission? So it's really thinking about the properties, thinking about this specific example, and connecting the two. So, real world applications. So that way, the next time you see some viral video go on, you can say, well, does this animal really speak human language? Does this animal really have language? And are you convinced? What do you need to see? That's what you're trying to convey to us. What do you need to see to be convinced? Tell us that. Be as concise as possible and make sure you're talking about it in this specific scenario. I don't want general. I don't want you to say something like, oh, in order for it to have interchangeability, it needs to talk with another dog. No, you need to be specific. You need to talk about it using the buttons because that's what this dog is claiming, or that's what the people are claiming this dog can do. It can talk using buttons, so make sure you explain the properties using the buttons. Okay, so each of these are 1 point each. So this is 12 points total for this part. It'll be half a point for correctness, half a point for explanation, roughly for each of those. And then the final 2 points come from this last paragraph response. I say paragraph loosely, it can be point form as well. Just make sure everything gets across as you intend it to get across, which is, do you believe that the dog demonstrates language use similar to humans? You can probably guess from the tone of my voice what the answer to that question is. That's not worth much. But the second point is an opinion question, and with opinion questions, really, it's it's just about writing something coherent and thinking about it. I'm not here to judge your opinions. Do you think that a speech language pathologist should be encouraging this type of report? Why or why not? Convey your response in 2 to 4 sentences, point form. A speech language pathologist is a linguist who helps children or adults correct speech problems. So this dog is a speech language pathologist dog. And she's very careful with the words that she uses. And I would say pay attention to the language she uses. You're not making a judgment about her, you're just making a judgment in general. Should linguists be encouraging this type of report? It's an opinion piece. So just write something about that. Very short. I just want an opinion piece about that. Uh, the second question you might not understand right now, and that's okay. We'll learn about this next week. We're going to talk about sounds, words, and sentences. So we're going to dive into the components of language. We'll talk about 4 different topics. We'll talk about phonetics, so sound structures. We'll talk about phonology, specifically syllables. We'll talk about word structures, so that's called morphology. And we'll talk about syntax, so sentence structure and word categories. So basically what you'll do is I'll give you 2 sentences, and I'll give you a word in each of those sentences, and you'll just have to answer some brief questions about those 2 words. So it looks a little bit daunting at first, but we'll go through each of those in isolation during the lecture. And then for your question on the assignment, you're basically taking all of those isolated parts and putting them all together and analyzing a word in the context of a sentence. So we're showing that all of those individual parts can be brought together, and they're used to analyze English. And we can use these to analyze really any language in the world, but because we're doing everything in English in the lecture, we're going to do English on the assignment. We'll do English on the test as well. So these will be 3 points each, and how they'll be graded is you'll lose half a point for every incorrect question, and you cannot go lower than 0 out of 3. Yeah, so it's very difficult to divide 3 into 8 equal parts, so that's how they'll be graded, and it'll be consistent across every student. So for the test coming up, which will be a week after the assignment is due, by the way, this is due June 2nd at 11:59 p.m. So this is due at midnight. So June 2nd, 11:59 p.m. That means that after lecture, you can ask questions if you have any, some last minute questions, and work on things. That's why it's due 11:59 p.m. So you can ask those questions after lecture. For the test, for the short answer section, you will be getting questions similar to these, but they will be much shorter. So instead of asking about all 12, you'll only be asked about 2, 3, or 4 of these, but the same type of question. Same with this. Instead of being asked 2 sentences in all 8 parts, you'll be given 1 sentence, and you'll only be asked maybe 2, 3, or 4 of these instead of all 8. So not only is it good practice for putting the entire lecture together and talking about all the concepts and understanding them, but it's also great practice for the test because you're basically getting a preview of the test questions. So yeah, that's it for the assignment instructions. If you have any questions at all, of course, the discussion board, email, office hours, all the regular channels. Feel free to ask at any time.